one thing I found quite surprising and touching with the response to my book, Yu Chu Hua Jiao, Shark's Fin and Sichuan Pepper, is that, I was writing about a Chengdu that I knew very well in the 1990s. And for younger Chinese people, even people in Chengdu, people seem to think that I'm writing almost about a lost world, the old lanes and the old street trades of Chengdu. China is a nation that loves food and loves eating so much. And yet cooking, the actual cooking, has always been seen as fairly low status. And I find one thing that makes me really sad about this too is that young Chinese people, children, are under such incredible pressure to study all the time. They are not really having time for leisure, for fun, for play, and also for learning about food and cooking. And I was very struck when I was first in Chengdu by how fresh and healthy the food was, and particularly how people ate so much less meat than they do typically in the West, in Britain and America. You had meat which was used as a flavoring, but not as the main deal. And now what's happened, of course, is that with the rising wealth in China, people are eating more and more meat and fish and seafood, which of course is delicious, but it's also very environmentally destructive, as we know in the West. The American, British way of life of eating so much meat is very unsustainable. It seems ironic in a way that at a time when people in the West are asking the question, how can we eat less meat? How can we eat healthily and deliciously without putting such pressure on the environment? But in China, you have all the answers in a way. You have a food tradition which is so healthy and so sustainable, and yet the younger generation are perhaps forgetting this and losing touch with it. And going back to the health food angle, that I was so impressed by the healthy deliciousness of Sichuanese food, and that I know the stereotype is that it's all terribly hot and spicy, but actually Chengdu food in the 1990s, traditional Sichuanese food, especially home cooking, is all about balance. So if you have mapo tofu, you will also have a light soup, some gentle stir-fried vegetables. So a very healthy way of eating. And what's happened now with Sichuanese food becoming so popular is that there's been an emphasis on this mala drama, on piles of chilies and Sichuan pepper, loads of oil, loads of MSG. And I feel that obviously, perhaps this is about social media and about people wanting stimulation and excitement, but it's also somehow missing one of the golden things about traditional Sichuanese food, which was that it's about balance, it's healthy, it makes you feel good as well as taste good.
People ask me how I become a fiction writer. I would tell them that I wrote my very first stories after my beloved grandpa, Ye Ye, passed away. Back then, the Chinese funeral baffled me. I was a college student, but still. And then on the funeral, I remember I was asked to cry out loud. I wasn't able to at that moment because all my feelings were still frozen from the tragedy. And then in contrast, someone I had never seen before dashed to the open casket and whined so loud as if he were a close family member. And then I didn't understand, the performative quality in this Chinese ritual. So I wrote my first stories to try to figure things out. Those stories actually, fortunately enough, brought me a fiction prize at my alma mater. And then I knew I could write from that moment. But then if I were to tell you about my nonfiction writing, I think it started way earlier and it was even more fun. My first nonfiction piece, according to myself, is entitled Snoring. Yeah, you didn't get it wrong, snoring. So I wrote it when I was 10. It was unpublished, of course, it was just for fun. That summer, I went to stay with my maternal grandma, 外婆. And then one day I just woke up to this idea that I wanted to describe the snoring sound everyone in my extended family made. Stories make us laugh and cry. In laughter and tears, we bond as a family or friends. And then stories also help me just appreciate others' so much better and deeper. I think it is an optimal position for a writer to always be an outsider. And in my case, I'm an outsider to both China and the US. Without overseas living experience, I wouldn't have had, different reference points to understand what's so unique about my hometown. And then in the US, something that looks completely mundane to the locals may strike me as unusual, as something worth exploring. I always find myself in awe of the world and of humanity because there's just so many surprises every day. And then just by wandering around the streets and talking to people, I feel the world is just full of wonder, right? And then I also can't help but share my joy of discoveries with my readers. And so I write.